Great companies can make poor strategic decisions. In one case, after building market share over 12 years to 60%, a company's strategic decision cut share in half within 2 years. That is the story of Motorola. In 1983, Motorola introduced the first cell phones, bulky and expensive analog devices, and in 5 years had established a dominant position. By 1994, Motorola controlled 60% of the world market share and was annually growing sales by over 20% per year. But an alternate technology was introduced, digital mobile. Motorola was slow to respond. So by the time it finally introduced a digital cell phone in 1997, Motorola market share had dropped to 34%. At first glance, we ask ourselves, how could Motorola neglect to commercialize the technology that is ubiquitous today? It wasn't because the executives were dumb. Bad companies don't achieve 60% market share in the competitive telecommunications market. Motorola's mistake was the inability to manage through their strategic issues' complexity. Let's examine this so you can see what I mean. Digital technology held several advantages. Since a signal was sent electronically, customers experienced less interference, so phone discussions were sharper, and there were fewer lost connections. Carriers saw benefits too. Digital signals permitted carriers to handle 10 times more traffic than analog signals using the same infrastructure. However, long before the cell phone decision, Motorola had made a poor choice, electing to manufacture Apple rather than PC chips, costing the company millions of dollars. Therefore, when confronted with 3 competing digital standards, the company feared selecting the wrong standard. It delayed making the decision. The company's marketing data supported analog. Motorola's customer research showed that customers wanted smaller and lighter cell phones. But the less developed digital technology required a larger footprint. Also, coverage for the fledgling technology was limited, both factors creating a potential marketing disaster. Yet these points against digital were contradicted by the enormous patent royalties that digital phone manufacturers were required to pay Motorola. So complexity for Motorola's strategic decision stemmed from the fact that technology, strategic, marketing, and finance data pointed towards completely different alternatives. This is where the lean strategic decision model could have helped Motorola. Just as engineers developed Gantt or PERT charts to reduce design complexities, LSDM is an approach to reduce strategic decision complexity. LSDM breaks massively complex strategic issues into a group of smaller decisions, so executives are better able to analyze one component of the problem, reach a conclusion, and then move on to the next component. As a first step, we would get the team to identify all the important factors impacting the decision to stay with analog or move to digital, using the decision criteria list. We already know some obvious criteria, such as coverage, benefits to carriers, customer needs, and technical risk. In the next step, we would establish a scale that would allow us to rate both of our alternatives. So, for example, with the criteria called cell phone coverage, we would set up 3 ranks. Negative would mean that digital coverage would be worse than analog over the long term. Neutral would mean that digital coverage would be the same as analog over the long term, whereas positive would mean that digital coverage would be better than analog over the long term. Then, we would ask individual team members to evaluate analog versus digital for each of the criteria we established. These results would be presented to the entire team so that Motorola executives could discuss the issue completely and objectively. then decide upon the best strategy. Most importantly for Motorola, LSTM's process would have required company leadership to analyze and gain consensus on these disparate data points. The process would likely have forced the team to analyze the technology acceptance discrepancy indicated by the market research versus the royalty growth data, which could have supported an earlier move to digital, thereby avoiding Motorola's market share disaster.